You're listening to the Love Unplugged podcast, episode 109. What is productivity? How can we be more productive in our businesses? What systems, processes, and habits can we put into place to be more effective and to move that needle forward faster? If these are questions you've asked yourself, then today's episode is for you. Without further ado, let's kick this year off on the right foot. Hey there, I'm your host, Jessica Fergon, and I am passionate about doing the inner work needed to reach your goals. Let me be your guide as we navigate all the fears and insecurities that surface when it's time to step outside of your comfort zone. Along with my knowledgeable guests and industry experts, I'm here to teach you how to reawaken your life purpose and passion and create the steps to turn your intentions into action. Ultimately, my goal is to empower you to rise above those blocks holding you back and start living a life that you are worthy and deserving of. So come on, it's time to slow down, find a comfy spot with your favorite organic tea, and get inspired. Thank you for tuning in to the Love Unplugged podcast. Hello, loves. Today I am joined by Alyssa Coleman. She is a productivity strategist for creative entrepreneurs and founder of Your Most Profitable Quarter Yet. A recovering procrastinator herself, she became obsessed with figuring out how the Oprahs, the Beyoncés, and the Marie Forleos of the world were running empires, staying creative as fuck, and making it all look super easy. As soon as she figured this out, her business did a complete 180. She mastered the exact process to take entrepreneurs from overworked and underslept to productive, profitable, and free. And from that, the Freedom Rebellion was born. I am obsessed with you. I want to learn how you are doing this, how you got your business to do a complete 180. I just want to soak it all up today. So I'm just so honored to have you join me, Alyssa. Thank you so much for being my guest. And I'm just so excited to learn all about your story and advice. But before we start, for those that don't know you yet, I would love for you to share a little bit more about you.
Oh, well, awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to just chat. So, yeah, my name's Alyssa. I'm in Canada. I just moved just outside of Toronto, and I'm excited to have this conversation. I definitely, there was a big 180 there a few years back, so I'm excited to talk about it.
All right, so I want to hear about this personal entrepreneurial journey and what your experience has been leading up to that point where you got to a 180 turnaround in your business. So what was that all like?
Yeah, so at this point, I was, already a full-time entrepreneur. I was working for myself. I had a business that was like somewhat working. I had clients. I wasn't in that startup phase where you're just sort of like, what the heck should I be doing? Like, am I doing this? I was starting to, get some momentum in my business. But I got to this point where I really quickly realized that the way I was running a business and running my own life really wasn't sustainable. I was working like 30, 40 hours a week. I was that person who had her laptop all day, but then somehow took the laptop to the couch and was still working on stuff while she was I'm doing air quotes over here, relaxing. I just was never off. And I felt like I was working so hard and getting so burnt out, but not actually enjoying any of the perks of entrepreneurship. And I had this moment, maybe some people might call it rock bottom, where I realized holy crap, the whole reason I became an entrepreneur was to have more freedom, was to work for someone cool and be able to be creative and create the things that I want to create and have the impact that I want to have. Meanwhile, I'm being a crappy boss to myself. I have literally no freedom, and I really wasn't making as much money as I thought I should be making, considering how many hours I was putting in, right? Like at a regular 9 to 5, if I was working overtime and working 50, 60 hours a week, I'd be making, maybe time and a half. I just started to realize that what I was doing was really unsustainable and unproductive. And so I realized pretty quickly I needed to make a big shift here, and I wanted to figure out what were these top entrepreneurs doing? What did these people have in common? And I became almost obsessed with I always say like Oprah, Marie Forleo, but just with like all entrepreneurs, I became obsessed with what their daily routines were like, what things they were actually working on. And even people, in our industry, I was like a full creep just asking, what are you doing every single day? Like, what are the things that actually move your business forward? Because it seemed like there was all these hacks and do this to make 10K by tomorrow morning, and it was like all these tricks, but it to me felt really, it felt like a small piece of the puzzle. You know what I mean? Like, I
Hmm.
wasn't looking for a hack. I was looking for how I was supposed to be running a business as a real legit entrepreneur that was able to have time freedom, location independence, and not like pull her hair out. And so that's where my obsession with productivity began, and really looking at it from this different lens. I decided, when I started going down this rabbit hole of productivity, a lot of the answers that were coming up for me were so based on corporate productivity, based on this, like what I think of as a patriarchal approach to work that was very much like get more done every week, like maximize your blah, blah, blah. And it just didn't feel like it wasn't the answer I was looking for. I didn't want to figure out how to get 5 hours of work done in 1 hour, and just like have more focus. I wanted to figure out what should I be doing and how should I structure my business so that I actually had more creativity, so that I could be more inspired, so that my business was running when I was away from my business. So I didn't feel like if I left my cell phone at home, I was like, you know, gonna have a panic attack because I thought my business would come to a screeching halt, right? Um, and that's kind of where this whole journey began. Long story long.
I think so many can relate. I mean, we talk about this in my day job because I am a director of operations for a sales organization. And,
Yeah.
even in being an entrepreneur, I see it all the time with fellow entrepreneurs where you're not just, you want to really hone in on the tasks that are actually going to move your business forward. You don't want to get working five hours and putting it down into 1 hour. That's not really the goal if that's not the work that's actually going to move your business forward,
Yes,
right? So like
absolutely.
this quest that you were on is like what everybody wants to know. So I think you bring so much value to entrepreneurs being able to share all that learning.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll tell you, it was a weird rabbit hole I went down because there were, like I like I was saying, there's so many tips and tricks, and I tried all of these weird hacks and ways to schedule your day and organizational, like different types of writing your to-do list and all of this stuff. And that's when I really started to ask myself the question, like, all right, so there's 100 different ways to do this. And I think this actually applies to like all business as well. Like there's 100, more than 100, but there's tons of ways to run a business. And most of them can be successful, but you have to figure out which one works for you and which one works for your business. But also, what do
Mm-hmm.
all these things have in common? And so I started becoming obsessed with like, all right, what does literally Obama and Oprah have in common with the way that they're structuring their day and their weeks, right? Like both of them are wildly successful in their own niches. And of course, I'm assuming have pretty different daily routines. Um, so what's the common ground here? And this is really like where I started to find some things that I could leverage that were less like, okay, uh freaking Obama plays basketball every morning. Like, I'm not going to start playing basketball every morning,
Mm-hmm.
but how does this relate to scaling in a productive way?
Oh, that's such a great insight because yes, there are everybody has their own advice, right? On,
Mm-hmm.
morning routines or things that you can do throughout the day or how to be productive, batch working, like there's all
Yeah.
these different things, but tailoring it to exactly what's going to work for you and how it's going to work for your business and then finding that commonality between all of them to really hone in on that. I think that was really brilliant.
What we started to really figure out was, yes, productivity could be that you have this specific morning routine, or it could be batch work, or it could be, jumping on a trampoline every 20 minutes to like move your lymphatic system or whatever the hack was. But really, truly, what it all comes down to, and what we see productivity as, and what my business is really based around, is that to us, productivity is figuring out exactly where you want to go. And for most entrepreneurs, this looks different. Some people, it's that they want to have a business so that they can leave work at 3 p.m. and go pick up their kid from school. For some people, it's that they want to have enough cash that they can leave their job and 2 days a week focus on writing this book that they've, had, pent up inside them for their whole life. For some people, it's that they want to have so much passive income that they can, leave, if any of us could ever travel again, but, maybe leave and go backpacking and not worry about, having to stay in a hostel if they don't want to, because they know that they have cash coming in. And for other people, it's different. They want to make, they want to make $1 million and they want to show up as this like keynote speaker. And like this looks so different to every person. And to us, productivity is being laser focused on whatever that end target is and making every single part of your business revolve around getting you to that, to that end goal as directly as possible. And what I see as a major, major distraction and, you know, form of procrastination for so many entrepreneurs is actually just losing focus of why you started your business or where you what the whole purpose of this whole thing is, because it's very easy to get distracted by, oh, I made $100,000 by starting a podcast, and you're like, oh, maybe I need a podcast, meanwhile you have no interest in podcasts and it's not getting you closer to backpacking, Peru or whatever it is. And so that's really our main focus, is making sure that we're reverse engineering and only taking the most direct route to that place that you're trying to get to.
I love that. It's so important to stay in your bubble, right?
Mm,
There's so much confusion and things coming at you when you're on social media or when you're, looking at what other people are doing. And then you start thinking that you should be doing that too, but it really doesn't truly align with what you're wanting to do. But it gets all confused and all that stuff. And I've had that happen to me so many times. And this year, I've been so focused on just being very protective of my bubble and limiting everything that distracts me from what I'm wanting to do.
yeah. And you know what? I think that's actually like, I also, as entrepreneurs, we're so hard on ourselves and we're like, oh my God, I get distracted. But the truth is, like, that is kind of what makes entrepreneurs so great at what they do, is like they have an idea and they just, the wheels start turning and they start putting it into motion. So it's actually something that's like a really incredible quality. So I do notice like entrepreneurs can be so hard on themselves, like, oh, I saw someone doing this and then I thought I should do that. It's, yes, it is a distraction, but also just remember, like, that is a strength. We just have to hone it in, in the
Mm-hmm.
direction that you want to go.
Totally. Now, before we get into your research and everything that you've kind of learned through all of this, I'd love to hear some weird hacks that you came across that you tried and you're like, what is this?
Yeah, well, one of my favorites that just totally didn't work, but well, it didn't work for me, was that you were supposed to have a mini trampoline in your office, and I think it was every 15 minutes, I think. You were supposed to take a trampoline break and basically like jump on the trampoline, and it was supposed to like move stagnant energy, or like I have no freaking idea. It didn't work. It was really fun, but I was just like mostly sweaty, like more often. I tried one thing that I thought would really work well for me was to have this like intense morning routine. Like I love Tim Ferriss, and I like started modeling my morning routine after his, and I had this whole like 2 hour long thing that I just kept saying I was going to do, but then never actually did. And I was like oil pulling and doing yoga, and like, I just had this whole process that was just, I was never going to do it. So that was a total bust. What else? One thing that I find a lot of people miss the mark on. I absolutely love my calendar. It's like it's everything to me. But a piece of advice that a lot of people had was to literally schedule out like every 15 minutes of your day. And maybe that can work for some people, but for me, that was like extremely distracting and anxiety inducing when my calendar
Mhm.
just looked like so jam packed. So, yeah, that was another hack that just totally didn't work for me.
Interesting. Well, you definitely tried it all, right? You were on your quest to figure it
Oh
all
yeah.
out.
Oh yeah.
Now, with all your research, what key learnings did you have that you have implemented and seen results from that you were actually expecting?
Hmm. So in the end, what we sort of realized was like once we kind of noticed that we were having success, it was I went back to my desk and I was like, okay, what did I do today? Because I had been trying like so many things and all of this. And so I started reverse engineering, like, what did I actually do this day? And I specifically remember the day that I was like, I think I'm onto something because I was sitting in a yoga class, or I was like laying there at the beginning of the yoga class, and the teacher said, like, thanks so much for coming out to the 5 p.m. yoga class. And she was like, all zen. And I froze on my mat because I was like, how the hell did I get here at 5 p.m.? Like, in my mind, I thought it must have been like 7 or 8 p.m., but I had made it to the 5 p.m. class. And it was this moment of being like, okay, I must be missing a call, or I must be like, I really felt like I must be missing something. And I mentally like went through everything in my head. I was like, no, like you're fine. You closed your laptop at 4:30. You walked to yoga and you made it here. And so that was the day we went back. I went back home and I was like, okay, what's on my like? What did I do today? Because I need to repeat this tomorrow and the next day. And so what we realized was a couple cool things were sort of merged together. One of them was we were very strategic with our calendar. I'm saying we, but at this point it was just me. It was only me in the business. And yeah, so I looked at my calendar. The way that I had it set up was it was time blocked, but in a way, so the way that we time block now is this way. And basically the way that we do it is all like tasks are together. So rather than, I'll give you an example. Let's say you want to like batch out Instagram posts for the week because you want to schedule them and whatever. The way that I thought and had started doing things was like, okay, I'm going to find a photo, write the caption, schedule the photo, add the hashtags. Okay, that was my workflow for posting a social media post, for like scheduling something for Instagram, right? What we realized is when we tried it this way, where we find all the images, let's say like, a week's worth of images, we find 7 images, then we write 7 captions, then we schedule 7 posts and add the hashtags for 7 posts. I could get things done in almost half the time. So it's almost like this is what I call the assembly line approach, where rather than doing one thing after another, you do all the things that are similar together. And so I had implemented that day. And I had also implemented something that is kind of a little hack, which is called the Pomodoro technique, which basically, if you don't know what it is, have you ever used this?
No.
Okay, it's like so simple but so cool. It's basically all you do is you set a timer for 25 minutes. You close all, let's say I wanted to write these Instagram captions. You close every tab except for the Google Doc that you're like writing the Instagram caption in, and you start the timer for 25 minutes. During those 25 minutes, you just do focus work. Oh, also turn off your phone and like put it in a drawer, like throw it across the room, just like set it out of your sight. But yeah, the timer goes off and you do 25 minutes of focused work. When the 25 minutes is up, you take a 10-minute break and do whatever you want. You have to take a break. And then you go ahead and do another Pomodoro. And the Pomodoro is basically just this 25 minutes of focused work. It's insane how much work you can get done in these 25-minute blocks. Like it's absolutely nuts. And I don't know why everyone's not talking about it. But especially if you're one of those people who will like open a blank Google Doc and you're just like staring at it. Or then you notice you like suddenly have another tab open and you're like looking at Facebook or whatever you're doing.
Hmm.
This was like a game changer for us. So those are a couple of the things um, overall that we were doing. Two of the like big ones were those ones.
Amazing. I'm definitely gonna have to try the Pomodoro thing. I like having like chunks of time where
Hmm.
like it just makes me like work so much faster and more efficiently because I know I only have 25 minutes to get this done or whatever
Yeah.
time limit I've set. So you really can't afford to have any distractions because that's it.
Yeah, and you get into this like flow that's
Hmm.
insane. And one thing that you can do is you can kind of like estimate, like, okay, this is gonna take me 3 Pomodoros or something like that. And it really helps with sort of setting a goal for how long each thing is going to take you, especially if you have a pretty pared down to-do list and you're like very focused with like, okay, today I'm only getting done these 4 things or whatever it is. um it's a total game changer.
Amazing. I'm gonna definitely take that up to 25 minutes and do them in
Try
chunks
it.
like that. Because I think I put a little bit too much time when I'm doing those focus sessions. Sometimes I'll
Mhm.
put like an hour or something, and then I start getting very distracted. And I know I can get
Totally.
the work done in so much less, right? Like it's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. But even like that's something similar that we do. We might put like an hour of time in the calendar, but then it only takes us, you know, one Pomodoro and a half or something like that, and then actually we're ahead of the game. It's the better feeling to be done before your time block is done than the other way around.
Amazing. Yeah. And that totally sets kind of a flow for the rest of the day. You get kind of in this rush where you're like, oh my God, I'm totally killing it. And then you like power through the rest of your day at the same speed.
Exactly. Exactly.
Mhm. Awesome. Now, are there any routines that we can implement that will help us be our best during the day?
Yeah, so the first thing that I really recommend is to have your own version of daily non-negotiables. So this is something that I implement in my business, and I am like pretty diligent with all of my clients in getting them to do the same thing. These are basically the tasks that are profit producing. Like these are the things that bring in cash in your business. And so for us, I'll give you an example of what our daily non-negotiables, how they break down, and we do them every morning for an hour. So basically the first thing I do when I get to my desk before I check my emails or check in with my clients or any of that is I do my daily non-negotiables, because I know if I just do this hour of work, no matter what else happens that day, I've done the things that I know move my business forward. Of course, there's other things that you need to do to run a successful company, but it's just like this, like you said, this first little bit of momentum where like boom, I've checked off this massive thing that I know is going to grow my business. Now the rest of the day, like this is all icing on the top of the cake, right? So for us, what the non-negotiables are number one, we start with our business mindset. So this can be whatever you want, but what I do is I write out daily lines. So whatever the um, belief that I'm trying to like force myself to currently believe, I write it out in a notebook as if I'm like in detention. Like, in detention, you're like, I will not like swear in class or whatever. And they made you like write it out like over and over again. Did you have that? Or were you like, you didn't have detention?
Well, I saw other students do it. I never got in trouble.
I love that. Okay, but you know what I'm talking
Oh,
about.
yeah.
So it's like detention, but for your limiting beliefs. So we write out, whatever we're currently trying to like bring more of and to affirm more of in our business. That's what I do for my business mindset, because as much
Mhm.
as I love strategy and all that stuff, I hate to admit it, but the things that cause me to procrastinate, the things that cause my business to come to any kind of, bottleneck, always comes back to my own limiting beliefs, my own self sabotage, or my own like mindset. So we start with the mindset. Don't skip this part, even if you want to. Then we move into some sort of growth task. So one, we have to actively do one thing that will grow our community. So whether that's your email list or your social following or whatever you want your community, wherever your community is, do one thing actively to grow that community rather than just like crossing your fingers and just hoping someone's going to find you on Instagram today and you're going to grow. Actively um, take action and do something for that. Then we do a nourishment activity. So this is with our current community, the people who are in our audience, the people who we want to create a relationship with and who we eventually want to purchase from us. Um, what are we going to do today to like provide some sort of value, some sort of nourishment, some sort of, um, thing that makes you feel like you're closer with that community. So we do some nourishment tasks. And then the last thing we do is make an offer. And yes, we do that every single day in some way, shape, or form, whether it's to everyone or to one specific person or whatever it is. we talk about our services and say, hey, here's where you can purchase them. And I'm really adamant that all my clients do this too. And it is something that we call them profit habits. So that it is a little bit tricky to do at the beginning, but like any habit, once you get into the routine, it starts to become pretty simple and just part of your everyday, your everyday routine.
I love that you brought that one up because I think a lot of people, including me, struggle with the selling aspect, right? Like
Hmm.
talking about your offerings and what's available for purchase and like whatever it
Absolutely.
is that your business is. And I think forcing yourself to do an action on that every day is just going to strengthen that muscle of it no longer feeling uncomfortable and you're dreading it. You're just going to naturally just do it every day.
Yeah. And, I did the exact same thing when I started my business. I was like hoping that somebody was going to reach out and be like, hi, I'd like to pay you. Like, how do I do that? Like, that's just not going to happen. And for some reason, we think that it will. And especially, I'll find that we think if we're growing our audience and, providing value to them, that people are just going to naturally want to buy. And yes, although both of those things do encourage people to want to purchase more, if you don't ever talk about what you do and how people can take action, it's just so much more unlikely. And yeah, it helps you get over that hurdle. It helps you get really creative with new creative ways to talk about your offer. But most importantly, it's actually the best form of like market research that you can do because you suddenly realize, oh, yesterday I talked about my offer in this way and I booked 3 discovery calls or whatever it is. I made 3 sales. This is obviously something people are interested in. Whereas, the day before I talked about it in this way and it was like crickets, nobody cares about that. And so you start to really hone in on what your audience needs to hear and what they resonate with and the way that like you can strengthen your message. And so it's one of the best things that you can do for clarity and just getting good at talking about the things that you do and the offers that you have.
Yeah, that's such great advice. I love that. Now, what are your thoughts on procrastination? I heard you talk about it a little bit earlier. I kind of want to dive deeper into this because I think a lot of people get stuck in procrastination often.
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, like I'm was a major procrastinator and I still can be in some areas of my life. But when it comes to my business, I pretty much don't procrastinate very often at all anymore. And the reason for this is I'm very clear on why I procrastinate. I thought it was just like a character trait. My whole life, I was the person who like handed in all of her papers like a day late and like I don't know. I just put things off so much to the point where it caused me so much stress and like anxiety, and I would cry about how I didn't study for my exam. And then, you know, I think back on that a lot, especially in university. Like, I wonder what grades I could have gotten or how well I could have done if I hadn't procrastinated. And so that is just clarity for me that it's 100% a limiting belief in a form of self sabotage. And so, what we find is that there's 2 main reasons for procrastination, and you have to figure out why you're procrastinating before you can ever move past it. Otherwise, you're just gonna, you might be like me, one of those people who always said, "Oh, I work really well under pressure." It's like, yeah, you did because you had no other choice. You know what I mean? And we don't want that to be the case in your business, especially because there are no due dates in your own, like when you're your own boss, right? It's not like you have to hand in a paper by a certain day or anything like that. You can keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And a lot of business owners find out pretty quickly that, you're a pretty lenient boss to yourself. um, and so yeah, so number one, you have to figure out the reason that you're procrastinating, and it's generally one of 2 things. The first thing is fear. So fear of what's going to happen once you actually do the thing. And that can be like so many different things. Like that's just, a dark rabbit hole that you kind of have to go down for yourself and really figure out like, what am I actually afraid of here? Most of the time it is fear. But the other reason that I find people procrastinate is perfectionism, which is, I've heard people say perfectionism is just fear in heels, which I don't know, it's a funny saying. But it is a little different. And in that realm, a lot of times people will procrastinate because they care about the thing that they have to do so much that they're afraid that they're not going to be able to do as great of a job as they want to do. So they keep putting it off until they have this like perfect scenario where like, the house is perfectly quiet and the candles are lit and you've had just enough coffee, but not too much that you're tired. And like, you're waiting for this just like perfect scenario where everything's going to go right. And then you're going to do it perfectly. And so if you find that you are a perfectionist, again, you have to unpack that a little bit more. It's again a limiting belief and a form of self sabotage. But once you get clear on what it is, and a lot of times what we do is we just sort of start like writing out, like, okay, what's going on here? Why am I afraid to actually do this? Like, why am I feeling the resistance to doing it? And once you write a lot of these things down, sometimes they sound like hilarious. You know what I mean? Like you write it down and you're like, oh, that's dumb. Like, now that I say it out loud or see it on paper, it's like it doesn't have any power over me anymore. And so, for one, it definitely helps like release. And once you're clear, you can release. But also, it serves as a starting point to start making some tangible solutions. So I see a lot of people just like work through your limiting beliefs and blah blah blah. It's like, well, that's kind of a big job, and if I've got to get this, thing done for my business tomorrow, I don't have time to like, talk to a therapist and unpack my like childhood wounds or whatever. So what we also like to do is look at that list, and you might still have fear around it, but you can say, okay, so I'm afraid that this is going to happen. What's one thing I can do tangibly to help mitigate that? And you can start to actually put into place some action steps that will help you. So maybe, one thing you're afraid of is like, I'm worried that if I do this and I put out this, the first episode of my podcast or whatever it is, that someone from high school might listen to it and then they're going to judge it and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, well, that's a big limiting belief that you probably have to like, do some work on. But right now, you got to put that podcast out. So maybe one action step you could take is you go block those people on Instagram and they don't see your stories anymore, or whatever it is. Just kind of a petty example, but it is a solution, and it does help you just kind of move one step forward. And so much of overcoming procrastination and overcoming perfectionism is just taking one small step in the direction. And you know, I can't exactly remember, but my grandma used to have this saying, or she still does, that makes it sound like she's dead. She's not. She used to say this though when I was a kid. There's something about, I think it was, there's something about starting that makes finishing a lot easier. And so, I always think about that. And it's like, you do just have sometimes taking that first step. It really takes the power away from how big of a job it feels like.
Mm-hmm. I love that you touched on this because I totally agree. I've been analyzing myself for quite some time now, figuring out why I've been procrastinating on some things in my business, which could actually bring money in, which
Yes.
is what I like. That's all I want is just to monetize this. And I'm like,
Oh,
what the
always.
hell is wrong with me? Like, why am I just like procrastinating and like constantly tinkering on things that will absolutely not do anything to move my like the needle move forward in my
Yeah.
business. I'm like, what am I like focusing on here? It's ridiculous. And I totally realized that it's like a form of self-sabotage, just like you
Yep.
said. And I'm like, why am I doing this? And for me, I just realized that it's because right now I can say, I'm doing this and I have an excuse as to why
Mm,
I'm not monetizing how I want and all this stuff.
hmm
But if I actually do the stuff that I'm procrastinating on and I launch it and all that stuff and it doesn't work, then I don't have an excuse anymore. Like
Yep.
I have a fear of failing,
Yes.
right? Like
Yep.
I'm hiding behind my excuses.
You know what? I see this so often with entrepreneurs too, that they'll look for these little jobs, these little things that keep them hidden and keep them behind the scenes and keep them working on the website and working on the Instagram, rearranging their Instagram feed. And, they know full well. And when they come to me, like as, on a call or something, and I'm their strategist or their coach, they see in my face me being like, why? What does that
Mhm.
have to do with anything? And there's, always a reason for blah, blah, blah. Like, we're all very smart. We know how to be like, well, actually, I got to do it because this, and that. But when you come down to it, it's just another way of hiding, which is another form of procrastination. So you're totally like, you know, you're not alone.
So funny. I am redoing my website. It was perfectly fine before. It's just totally hilarious that you brought that up.
Yeah.
And I was like figuring out because my website was very podcast focused, and I'm making the podcast like an extension of my blog and my business and what I'm trying to grow. So
Yeah.
obviously, I'm trying to like create things that I can sell and whatnot, like courses and all that stuff.
Hmm.
And I have to redo my website because I want that to be the forefront, and then the podcast will then just be like a page on it type thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I've like mapped out my whole thing and worked with my designer and stuff and tried to figure out like to break it down into phases. And then I'm like, what's the like most important aspect of this website that I'm trying to create that is actually going to help me generate money? Like,
Yeah.
what do I need to focus on absolutely first so that I'm not hiding behind this huge ass project anymore? And I'm just focusing on that and getting that up and going so that I can start generating money. And then the other stuff will just keep going behind the scenes.
Hmm.
And I'm
Yes.
like, I have to get my offerings page up. So I'm like, that's the very first thing that needs to get done with my designer, and she's working on it now. But I was just
Love it.
like, you're not doing this anymore. Like, stop tinkering and making up excuses. Get what you need up in order for you to start generating money and all that stuff, or whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. That is your goal. And then you can like have the other stuff going on behind the scenes, but like prioritize.
Totally. You know what? It's so funny, like the way you're describing like the conversation you're almost having with yourself. I think that so many of us can probably relate to this because it's like there's the part of you that's the procrastinator, and then and is in that limiting belief and is like in all of that, and then there's the part of you that's like, I see what you're doing. Like your your higher self is like, mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, and we all have that, and that's why I am so like personally, I'm not by any means a mindset expert or anything like that, but personally, I'm so committed to personal growth because so much of entrepreneurship is a mental game, like so much of it, and it doesn't stop. It's not one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, once you have your funnel set up, then you can just set it and forget it, or like once you've figured out your ads, you can just scale it. There's no scaling your mindset in my experience so far.
No, it's totally aligned journeys. In order to succeed in your business, you need to be able to do the personal work
Yeah.
to grow, right? Like you need to figure things out. Now, I want to talk about outsourcing with you and
Yeah.
sticking to your zone of genius. Now, it can be hard to do this at the beginning when you are starting a business because you're kind of doing it all. And obviously, you can't hire a team for the most part right off the bat. So, how can we do this? How can we really stay focused on the areas that we're really thriving in and then outsource the rest?
Yeah. So absolutely, like when you first start your business, I actually don't recommend like outsourcing everything straight from the beginning, especially if this is your first business, because a lot of times you start hiring people, but you're not clear on what needs to happen, and so you're not being an incredibly clear leader, and sometimes that does lead to like wasting money and all of that stuff. So yeah, you do have to a lot of things you do have to figure out on your own before you can start outsourcing. However, that being said, I do recommend, like, as soon as you have some margins in your business, reinvest that back into hiring a team, because the return on that will be so, so high. And it's something that I think so many people put off, and I absolutely did, which again was a form of like control and blah, blah, blah. But once you do it, even if it's for like 2 hours a week, it's so addictive because you suddenly start to realize, oh, I don't need to do everything. Oh, actually, I can be supported by my business. I can be supported by my team. And you'll start to like now everything that you're doing, you're like, do I need to do this, or can somebody else do this? Or do I need to do this, or can I automate this? And that's something that you can do right away if you don't have the budget for a team like monthly, or even like a VA that you want to hire or something like that. Start with software. A software is a really great way, but start asking yourself with everything that you're doing, is this something that I absolutely love doing? Or is it something that I can eliminate or automate or delegate to somebody else? And in my experience, like so much of a business can be automated, or you can create some workflow for that makes your life easier, but more importantly, frees you up to do the things that actually like the CEO should be doing of their company. And so often when you're like busying yourself with all these tasks and all these things that you feel like nobody else can do except for you, um, you're limiting how how much time you have to be inspired, to be creative, to get clear on your messaging, to connect with your potential clients, and to create those relationships that will actually create a thriving business. So asking yourself, like, can I automate this? Is the first thing that you should be doing. And if you don't know how to automate it, finding somebody who does, or finding somebody who has, or go down the rabbit hole, put some time in your calendar once per week to like go down a rabbit hole and look into different software and stuff like that. Or just write in your to-do list, like ask someone who has done this. It's a really great way to get some information. Um, but yeah, if you don't have a budget for a team yet, automating is definitely like a cheaper-ish alternative.
I love that. I'm a huge fan of automating things and putting in workflows and all that
Hmm.
stuff. It takes the brain work like right out of it, and you can
And
just
it's so
like power through.
satisfying.
Mm-hmm. Now, we've talked about a few things that we can do in our business to be a little bit more productive. Do you have any other advice on how we can do that even more in our business?
Yeah, I mean, on a more like macro scale, really what I recommend is having a calendar um that does a lot of the heavy lifting for you, because kind of like you were mentioning earlier, you know full well the things that will make you money, and it's focusing on your offer, it's talking about your offer, it those things. And how I was saying, there's like the two versions of you. There's like the higher self kind of version of you, and then there's a version of you that maybe shows up every day and gets distracted by stuff and all of that. What I like to do is when I'm in my like best self, like CEO version of me, I create the calendar, I create the project plan, I reverse engineer like what needs to be done and when, and I put all of that in my calendar. Then when I show up day to day, which like, okay, today's a Friday, as we're recording this, it's like a weird election week and everybody's like distracted. When I show up as like the regular version of me employee, what I call employee Alyssa, I'm not always my highest CEO level of myself. So, in order to not be distracted by the million and one ideas that I might have, or just feeling straight up lazy that day, whatever's in my calendar is like, that's final. That's what happens, because I know that my CEO, which is me, spoiler, she has reverse engineered and she set me up for success. So all I have to do is follow through. And that's why I do not negotiate with my calendar, whatever's in there. I mean, unless there's like an emergency or something like that, I'm not like, sorry, you know, my boss says I can't go. Like, no. But, for the most part, I don't negotiate with what's in there. When it's in there and how long I give myself, I just stick to that. And so that's a really big skill that I didn't learn until pretty late into my my productivity rabbit hole. And but once you master it, it's like a major entrepreneurial flex, and like you will see the results pretty instantly. Because if you, CEO version of you, plans out your quarter and is really generous, and I'm very I'm a very nice CEO. I make sure my employees have breaks throughout the day. I make sure that they're not, they know exactly what they should be doing. I make sure that there's like very clear instructions and enough time to do every task and all of that. And so I know that the CEO mapped out everything that needs to happen for this quarter in order to hit my goal. And so I just show
Mhm.
up and I make it happen.
Be your own boss and be your own employee, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Now, with launches, I'd love to hear tips on what we can do to maximize the impact.
Yeah. Oh, I love launching. I could do a whole podcast episode just on um, live launches specifically. I absolutely love them. I think they're such a fun way to create impact and to like, it's almost like a mini like party in your
Yeah.
business. Um, The number one most important thing you can do for a launch is pre-plan. You should know at least 3 months before you launch exactly what's going to happen in your launch, exactly what your numbers are, and exactly how you're going to hit them. Biggest mistake that I see is people say, you know what, I'm thinking of doing a launch next week, and then the launch is over, they don't hit their targets as they want, and they're burnt out, and they're like, that was exhausting, that was insane, and like I didn't even have that great, of a result. I hate launching. And so it is kind of like getting a bad rap in a lot of instances. But if you are really strategic and you give yourself like a good runway and you know how much you need to grow your audience by or what numbers you need to hit and all of that, and you're um, also realistic with your launch targets, launches can be extremely fun and a great way to connect with your audience and extremely profitable. So, my best advice would be to give yourself like a lot more time than you think you do and schedule everything because coming back, bringing it back to limiting beliefs, when you launch, your deepest limiting beliefs will show the fuck up and they will try to ruin you. And so the more that you have like everything scheduled and just, done basically, the less likely you are to like self sabotage, cancel a launch halfway through, or like, maybe you've only gotten one sale and you're like, well, maybe I'll just scrap this whole launch. Meanwhile, if you had just followed through, maybe three more people were going to join on the last day. And everybody has this thought. So if you're having it, you're like, if you're in a launch right now and you're like considering this, just know that it's like normal. And another like secret to launching is to pre-plan what you're going to do the week after your launch. So if you want to put out nourishing content or, whatever it is that you want to do, plan that before your launch because there is like some downtime that you're going to want to give yourself after a launch because it does take, especially like I'm personally an introvert, so I notice that after I show up in a launch and I'm like on, I need a little break. And so I'll notice like the next week I want to be like gentler with myself, or I want to work less hours, or I don't really want to show up on social as much. And so give yourself the freedom to do that so you don't just fully burn out. And that's like, you know, one of the biggest productivity killers is burnout.
With everything that you've said, like something just kind of sparked in me, and it's you have to look at your business as a business. Like you have to look at it as this is like your full-time gig. This is your business that you're growing, and you have to like put all into it. I feel like sometimes we kind of just look at it as like a side hustle or like something we're
Yeah.
just doing off the corner of our desk, and we don't treat it with the appropriate level of attention that it needs.
Yeah. And like seriousness or something.
Exactly. Like you need to take this serious. You need to put 100% into it. You need to really be focused and you need to treat it like a business, right? You can't have an employee mindset. You have to have like an entrepreneur owner mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. You're so right. And I think there is a lot of confusion, and this is not to be like shady or anything, but there is a lot of confusion in the online space because a lot of people are basically selling. It gets to be so easy. I made, $100,000 in my first month of my business just, by having a positive mindset. And although I think all of that can be true, and yes, like, I've made it clear here that mindset is a massive part of running a business, but also I think it puts this like idea in people's minds that like, oh yeah, like I just need a couple of thousand Instagram followers and then an offer and then I'm going to be rich. And it's like, okay, those are the parts maybe that you're seeing, but truly the people who are um, the people who have sustainable businesses that are making an impact are not treating it like something that they're just charging their crystals and like crossing their fingers. They have a strategy and maybe they make it look easy, but I'll tell you right now, they're planning out their quarters, they're being very clear, and if they're not, what I can tell you as well after having conversations with hundreds of entrepreneurs is that even if that person has an successful launch that first time, they'll come to me and say, I cannot do that again. I cannot do it in that way again. I'm extremely exhausted. I'm burnt out. Like, this cannot go on this way. So, there is this, like, I don't know if you've experienced this, but there is this sort of phenomena in marketing that's like, it almost encourages people to not take their business seriously. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%.
And so I think you're right. It's like, no, you got to treat this like a boss if you want to be a boss. If you want to have a side
Mhm.
hustle, then there's nothing wrong with that either, like
Exactly.
go for it.
Exactly. Now let's talk about your offerings. What do you have available to support your community in becoming the most productive self and having crazy ass businesses that are making money?
Yeah, so I really only have about two ways to work with me. My favorite is a program called Your Most Profitable Quarter Yet that you mentioned at the beginning. Um, and it's a group program. It's 3 months long. It helps you set up your business as a system of systems. So, what I mean by that is that the way that your business should be running is a series of um, systems. I guess I'm not explaining it very well, but it's that every part of your business should be looked at and treated as its own part of a greater machine. And so we set that up together so that you have a really productive business, but most importantly, a business that is designed to give you more freedom in your life, meaning time freedom, location independence, freedom to do, cash freedom to do with the money whatever you want. Um, and so that's your most profitable quarter yet, and that's my favorite program right now. And it's opening back up for enrollment in January.
Awesome. All right. So if anybody wants to learn more about you, where can they connect with you?
Um, so my website is alyssacoleman.ca, and I've got lots of like blogs and stuff like that there that you can check out, or create me on Instagram, and it's also at alyssacoleman.ca.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Alyssa, for taking the time to share your journey, but for also helping us learn how we can be more productive in our businesses to see the results that we're actually wanting to achieve.
You're welcome. Well, thanks so much for having me. This is really fun.
I'm Jessica, and thanks for tuning in today to Love Unplugged, the podcast. If there are any questions or topics you'd love answered on the show, head on over to www.projectloveco.com and share your request with me. If you haven't yet, go to iTunes and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast and share it with a loved one. Your feedback means the world to me, and the community we've created is what fuels our discussions here. After all, this is all for you. Join me next time for another unplugged conversation.